Former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor is being laid to rest today. Funeral services were held for her this afternoon in Washington. Justice O'Connor broke the glass ceiling in 1981 when she became the first female justice to be appointed to the Supreme Court. She went on to serve the nation's highest court until 2006. Justice O'Connor died earlier this month at 93 years old. President Joe Biden was the ranking member of the Senate Judiciary Committee the day she was nominated. He reflected on her time served on the bench of the Supreme Court.
And her trust in the capacity of human institutions to make life better is what this world was abiding. And how she embodied such attributes under such pressure and scrutiny helped empower generations of women in every part of American life, including the court itself, helping to open doors, secure freedoms, and prove that a woman can not only do anything a man can do, but many times do it a heck of a lot better. Excuse my language.
CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford was at the funeral service. She joins us now from Washington. Jan, good to see you. Tell us about your experience there at Justice O'Connor's funeral service. What stood out to you?
Well, I mean, it was incredibly moving, you know, in the majestic National Cathedral where she had actually worshipped when she was here in Washington, gathering thousands of people here to pay her respects. And I really thought it was interesting because so much of what we appreciate about Justice O'Connor and her colleagues, we'll talk about at the Supreme Court, is how she is so good at bringing everyone together. Justice Thomas has called her like the glue of the Supreme Court because she would reach out to people who may not agree and make them have lunch together and all that kind of thing. And just today, we really saw that even in death. She is bringing Washington together. You saw the president, of course, with his remarks, you know, calling her this great American pioneer. That was immediately followed by the conservative Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Chief Justice John Roberts, who spoke about how she broke barriers today that really are unthinkable. Like she was the historic first, not only the first woman, of course, on the Supreme Court, but entering the law, the practice of law at a time when men didn't think women should be lawyers, much less judges. So when you kind of reflect, and that's what it was today, a reflection, a celebration of an extraordinary life in the law and someone who really changed the path of this country and showed women what was possible and, of course, showed us all, men and women, what excellence looked like from the bench.
That's certainly true. And I wonder, in terms of the cases that came through her court, what stands out to you as some of her greatest accomplishments?
Well, as a justice, she was very much the justice in the center. Remember, she had been a legislator back in Arizona. So when she came to the court, she was like this consensus builder. She had this incredibly keen ability to kind of see where Americans were on some of these controversial issues. So she was, in many ways, this moderating force of the court. She was the justice in the middle. She was often referred to as the swing justice. Sometimes she would vote with her conservative colleagues. She was a conservative, but she would restrain them, hold them back. She was the key vote, for example, in keeping the Supreme Court from overturning Roe versus Wade back in 1992. She also refused to overturn affirmative action when she was on the court. We see now that the justices, more conservative, are undoing some of those things that she did. I think her greatest accomplishment, though, was just in kind of the voice and the moral clarity that she provided the justices in terms of consensus and getting along. She was, like I said, the glue of that Supreme Court. And she changed the court in that way and showed them that they have to get along, even if they don't agree. And I think you still see that today. They talk about that and still appreciate that.
Yeah, perhaps on the court, but it seems like such an essential quality to have just in politics all around, in an everyday life in this country and abroad. As you mentioned, today's more conservative court has effectively reversed two of her most significant decisions by ending the constitutional right to abortion and ending the use of race in admissions. What do you see this as meaning to her overall legacy?
Well, I mean, I think obviously when you have a change in membership in the court, and this court is now more conservative, Justice Alito, who wrote that decision that finally did overturn Roe versus Wade, actually replaced Justice O'Connor. So when you have a change in membership, sometimes the court will undo some of those previous decisions, like we saw more liberal courts do in decades past. I don't think that affects or tarnishes her legacy in any way. I mean, she very much stood for the proposition that this is what the law says, this is how I see the law, let's do it and get it done. Remember, she voted with the conservatives in Bush versus Gore, that 5-4 decision that handed the presidency essentially to George W. Bush. Her view in that case, though, and I talked to her about it many times, was that was yesterday. That was a decision we decided yesterday. Let's move on. And I think that's why you saw her being such a great consensus builder, and also that glue I was talking about. That was the case yesterday. We did that. Today is today. Let's move on and move on to the next one.
Important lesson there. Jan Crawford, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sarah Suggs joins us now. She is the president and CEO of the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy. Sarah, it's so good to have you. Talk to us about what made Sandra Day O'Connor the right pick at that time to become the first female to serve on the Supreme Court.
That's a great question. I've often pondered that, and it occurs to me that her being raised on the Lazy Bee Ranch, 200,000 acres, straddling Arizona and New Mexico, with cowboys, so many men, rugged terrain, perseverance, grit. I think about then going into an environment decades later in Washington, D.C., and how some of those unique attributes with which she was raised served her well on the court with the male-dominated brethren.
Yeah, tell me about that. What were some of those obstacles that she faced being the first woman to serve on the high court, and how did she have to approach the role versus her male colleagues?
Well, I know from one of her clerks, her first clerk, that when she arrived in Washington in 1981, she didn't have a desk in her chambers. Wow. And there were files piled all around the room. And so she and her first clerk, Ruth McGregor, who went on to become a Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice for Arizona, just sat on the floor and started going through files because the first Tuesday in October was around the corner.
So looking back, in your opinion, and looking at the country we have in our hands now, what sort of lasting impact did she have in the nation's court system and in the country as a whole?
Well, one of the unique attributes of the justice was that she's one of the very few Supreme Court justices that served in all three branches of government. She understood how legislation impacted citizens. She understood the different pieces of law and how it all fit together. And so serving in all three branches, I think, made a big difference. The other thing was that she was a consensus builder when she was in the Senate as majority leader. She would literally invite the entire Senate to her home, both sides of the aisle, cook for them, break bread, find consensus, go back, write the legislation. Her legacy of civility, I think, is one of the most important things that we'll reflect upon, because she was so civil and so such a good listener and welcoming. Her hospitality, her grace. I think some of those aspects of her life, when she was either held public office or was on the court, are so true of who she is. And at the Institute, at the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute that she founded, are pillars of civil discourse, civics education, and civic engagement. Active citizenship are personified in Justice O'Connor.
You know, that civility you talk about is precisely so important to remember, to communicate, to honor, to uphold. How does your work at the Sandra Day O'Connor Institute for American Democracy look to further that legacy, to pass it on to people who have survived her in our country?
So we have multi-generational programming, and one of the areas in public policy is the ability to bring individuals with disparate points of view together in the same room, whether it's an online town hall, at a conference table, in what we call a civic collaboratory. Engage in respectful listening, mutual respect, shared purpose. We have common goals of solutions, or at least in most cases, we're looking to find a solution to a problem. And listening is part of that, but also just respect for the other person's point of view. You need, again, disagreeing without being disagreeable. And we have programs for ambassadors, high school programs. That's an online program for civics and debate. We have ambassadors from all over the country that meet once a month and work with us on civics and, as I said, civility. And so we'll keep going with those programs as well as for adults.
Please do. Such essential work, a civic collaboratory. I hope we all come up with one of our own and bring people together to discuss. Sarah Suggs, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.